Chapter 1. Dr. Sarah Chen was attending her first diplomatic function as part of Earth's trade delegation to the Veltorian Empire, and she was already exhausted. The ceremony had been going on for 3 hours. Elaborate ritual greetings, formal presentations, the kind of pageantry that made Sarah grateful she usually dealt with power systems rather than politics. She stood in the back of the throne room with other low-ranking delegation members, trying to stay awake while the Veltorian court conducted what her briefing materials called the bonding ceremony, a critical cultural ritual where the young crown heir would be formally presented to the court. The Veltorians were telepathic, and Sarah knew from briefings that their young underwent imprinting, forming psychic bonds with their first protector, an evolutionary mechanism ensuring parental devotion. The crown heir had been carefully isolated to ensure they imprinted on Empress Talshira during today's ceremony. The ceremony began. The young heir, maybe 4 in human equivalent years, was brought in by handlers wearing specialized shielding that prevented premature psychic contact. The child was meant to walk to the throne. When they reached the Empress, the shields would lower and imprinting would occur naturally, except the child didn't walk toward the throne. The moment the handlers lowered the shield, the heir's head snapped around toward the back of the room, directly toward Sarah. And then the child ran, not toward their mother on the throne, but toward Sarah, crossing the entire throne room at a sprint while the assembled court watched in stunned silence. Sarah had 3 seconds to process this before a small Veltorian child crashed into her legs and wrapped their arms around her waist with desperate familiarity, making sounds the translator rendered as found you, finally found you. The entire court froze, absolute paralysis born from existential terror. Sarah looked down at the child clinging to her, then up at the Empress on the throne whose expression was shifting through shock and devastating comprehension. "I don't," Sarah started, but a court official was already moving toward her with careful precision. "Do not move," he said quietly. "Do not push the child away. Do not disrupt the bond." "What bond? I've never met this child." "You have." The Empress's voice cut across the throne room. She was shaking. "You met my child 6 months ago, when they were still unborn, when I was in emergency labor in the quarantine zone, when your ship sent a distress beacon." Sarah's stomach dropped as memory surfaced. 6 months ago, her ship suffered catastrophic life support failure near Veltorian space. They drifted for hours, sending distress beacons on every frequency. She remembered the cold, the depleting oxygen, the very real fear of dying in the dark. "We didn't know there was anyone else in that zone," Sarah said. We were suffocating. We called for help. And your distress beacon's frequency bridged the psychic void surrounding the quarantine zone." The Empress stood, tears on her face. "My child was born during your ship's crisis. They heard your fear, your desperation, your call for survival, and they imprinted on me, but I wasn't even there. You were there psychically. Your beacon, your fear, your presence. It was the first thing my child's telepathic sense registered. You became their anchor, their first protector." The Empress approached slowly. "They have been waiting 6 months for you to return." Chapter 2. Sarah was taken to a private chamber with the child still attached. The heir refused to let go, and officials carefully explained that forcing separation could damage the young Veltorian's developing psyche. The Empress joined them, along with advisors and child psychologists. "Explain it to me," Sarah said, trying to stay calm while a small alien child sat in her lap making contented sounds. The head psychologist, Shenrel, took the lead. "Veltorian young are born with latent telepathic ability that activates in the first hours. They instinctively reach out psychically for the nearest protective presence, usually the mother. The imprinting creates a permanent psychic bond, not full telepathy, but a connection allowing the child to sense their protector's emotional state and location." "But I wasn't the mother. I wasn't even physically present." "No, but you were present psychically. Your distress beacon operated on a wavelength our telepathic young can perceive. Your fear, your desperation, your call for help. It transmitted on a frequency my child's developing telepathy interpreted as a protector calling for them. The Empress's voice was controlled. They reached out to you instead of me. Can it be undone? No, Shenril was gentle but firm. The imprint is neurological. It's not choice or preference. It's fundamental rewiring of how the child's brain processes attachment. Breaking it would cause permanent psychological damage. So what does this mean? It means, the Empress said quietly, that my child has bonded with you as their primary protector. You are in every way that matters to their neurology, their parent, and I am, her voice broke, I am the stranger. Sarah looked at the child in her lap, the crown heir who should have bonded with their mother, but instead imprinted on a human engineer, trying not to die in the dark. I don't know how to be a parent. I don't know anything about Veltorian children. None of us asked for this, the Empress said, but it is what happened, and now we must determine what comes next. What came next was weeks of impossible negotiation. Sarah couldn't simply leave. The child, Kaelin, became distressed when Sarah was out of perception range for more than a few hours. But Sarah also couldn't stay permanently because she had a life, a career, commitments on Earth. Court psychologists proposed graduated separation. Slowly increasing time Sarah spent away while strengthening the child's bond with the Empress. It failed, not because Sarah didn't try, but because Kaelin's neurology simply didn't work that way. The imprint was absolute. Chapter 3. The Empress requested a private meeting, without advisors or the child present. They met in a small garden and Sarah could see that Talshira had been crying. I have a question, the Empress said, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay, do you want my child? Not as obligation or complication, but genuinely. Do you want to be Kaelin's parent? Sarah thought about the past weeks of having a small Veltorian child follow her everywhere, asking questions, showing her drawings, falling asleep against her shoulder during meetings. How Kaelin laughed at her terrible jokes, got excited about engineering concepts they were too young to understand, sought her out when scared or sad or happy. I don't know, Sarah admitted. I didn't plan for this. But they're a good kid. Smart, curious, affectionate. And they need me in a way I can't just abandon them because it's inconvenient. That is not what I asked. You asked if I want to be their parent. And I think I'm starting to, yes. Which is terrifying because I have no idea what I'm doing, but Sarah stopped. But they're mine now, aren't they? Whether I planned for it or not. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. I carried that child for 9 months. I went through emergency labor in a quarantine zone. I spent 6 months preparing for the bonding ceremony, and instead they ran to you. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is not your fault. It is, Talshira's voice broke. It is the cruelest possible outcome of evolutionary biology and unfortunate timing. What do you want? Because I can't undo the imprint, but I can try to make sure Kaelin knows you're their mother too. I want what any mother wants, for my child to be happy and healthy and safe. And the unfortunate truth is that Kaelin is happiest with you. Their neurology recognizes you as their protector. The Empress met Sarah's eyes. So I am asking you, will you raise my child? Not as duty, but as actual parent who cares for their well-being. Sarah thought about all the reasons to say no. About her career, her life on Earth, the impossibility of parenting an alien child who would one day rule an empire. Then she thought about Kaelin asking her to read bedtime stories, showing her their favorite toys, trusting her absolutely. Yes, Sarah said, but I need help. I don't know how to raise a Veltorian child. Then we raise them together, Talshira interrupted. You are their imprinted parent. I am their biological mother. Perhaps there is a way for both of us to be part of their life. Chapter 4. What they built was unprecedented. Co-parenting between the biological mother, who was Empress, and the accidentally imprinted human, who became protector through cosmic coincidence. Sarah split her time between Earth and the Veltorian court. When on Earth, Kaelin stayed with Tal Shira. The separation was difficult, but they learned to cope because Sarah always returned. The imprint didn't fade, but Kaelin also developed genuine affection for Tal Shira, not the neurological bond they had with Sarah, but real love for the mother trying so hard to be part of their life. Tal Shira taught Kaelin about Veltorian culture, history, and responsibilities they'd one day inherit. Sarah taught them about curiosity, questioning, and understanding how things worked. Together, they raised a child comfortable in both human and Veltorian contexts, who saw having two parents from different species as normal. The court never fully accepted it. There were factions that considered Sarah an outsider who usurped the Empress's rightful bond. But Kaelin was happy, healthy, and developing well, and that mattered more than tradition. 5 years after the catastrophic bonding ceremony, Sarah sat with Tal Shira watching Kaelin play with other court children. "I never thought this would work," Tal Shira said quietly. "I spent months resenting you for stealing my child's bond. And now I am grateful, not for the circumstances but for you specifically. You could have rejected Kaelin, could have insisted biology matters more than neurology. Instead, you chose to be their parent despite having every reason to refuse. They needed me. That seemed like enough reason. But most beings would not have agreed." Tal Shira squeezed Sarah's hand. "Thank you for being better than most. You're their mother, I'm just—" "You are their parent," Tal Shira corrected firmly. "The imprint makes that undeniable. But I am also their mother. Perhaps both things can be true." Kaelin ran over, excited about something they discovered. They climbed into Sarah's lap, still seeking their imprinted protector first, but then reached out for Tal Shira too, wanting to share with both parents. Sarah watched Tal Shira's expression soften as Kaelin chattered excitedly, and thought about the frozen court 5 years ago, about the paralysis born from watching a crown heir embrace a stranger, about a mother's heartbreak as her child sought comfort in alien arms. They'd built something from that disaster. Not what anyone planned, but something that worked. A family bound not by biology alone or neurology alone, but by deliberate choice to prioritize a child's well-being above tradition and preference. The whole royal court had stood paralyzed when the heir rushed to embrace Sarah. But Kaelin had never hesitated, had never doubted, had simply followed their neurology to the person who felt like safety. And Sarah, who had only been trying to survive in the dark 6 months earlier, had somehow become exactly what they needed: a parent who chose them back.